In this presentation, we'll cover the basics of how to apply for your Tribal Historic Preservation Office Historic Preservation Fund grant. THPO operation grants are awarded to cover the costs of eligible activities within program areas of the Historic Preservation Fund that the tribe agreed to assume from the State Historic Preservation Office under its initial MOA partnership agreement with the National Park Service. The programs of the Historic Preservation Fund include Survey and Inventory, Planning, National Register Program, Review and Compliance, Development Acquisition Covenants, Tax Act, Certified Local Governments, Administration, and Education. Your MOA partnership agreement will state which of these programs your tribe agreed to assume from the State Historic Preservation Office. Each tribe must submit an application for their annual Historic Preservation Fund apportionment. Funds are not automatically awarded. Application requirements change from year to year based on changes in federal, agency, or program policy, so please be sure to follow the current year's instructions that are included with the application opportunity on Grants.gov. Failure to follow the instructions will, at a minimum, delay our ability to award the grant funds, and at most may lead to the tribe being denied their grant funds. Each tribe's annual grant covers 2 federal fiscal years. The grant will have a start date of October 1 of the fiscal year under which the funds are appropriated by Congress and will expire 2 years from that date. This is true regardless of when the grant agreement is actually signed. Because THPO HPF grants are awarded every year, you may have 2 grants covering a fiscal year, as demonstrated in this slide. In order to submit an application for funds, your tribe must have an active registration in each of the following federal systems. Dun and Bradstreet. A DUNS number is like an EIN or TIN number. It's a federal identification number. The System for Award Management, or SAM. This is the official U.S. government system for all non-federal entities looking for financial assistance. Grants.gov. This is the federal grant application system. Automated Standard Application for Payments, or ASAP. This is the federal payment system used by NPS. If you are a new THPO, you should register on these sites in the order listed here. None of these systems require a registration fee, so if they are asking you for a payment, you're not on the correct site. Failure to have an active registration in the DUNS, SAM, or Grants.gov systems by the application due date will disqualify the tribe from receiving newly appropriated funds, as your application will not be accepted by Grants.gov. Some of the registration processes can take several weeks to complete, so start the registration process or start confirming that the existing registration has not expired as early as possible. To be eligible to apply for an annual award, a THPO must be in compliance with its THPO MOA partnership agreement, be in compliance with all past THPO HPF grant requirements and reporting, and have no other issues that would legally bar it from receiving grant funds. To find the opportunity, the grant application opportunity, search on CFDA number 15.904 on Grants.gov and select the opportunity for THPO Historic Preservation Grants in Aid. Only applications received through Grants.gov by the deadline will be accepted. We urge you to submit an application at least 1 week prior to the deadline to allow you time to correct any errors detected by Grants.gov. Several tribes have lost their annual funding due to last-minute issues in submitting their application. Confirmation that your grant was submitted on time can only be documented by the receipt of 3 emails from Grants.gov. Again, when applying, it's important that you review all of the current year's application instructions. To do this, download all of the files under the Related Documents tab on Grants.gov and read and follow all instructions included with the application's Notice of Funding Opportunity. Again, you must receive 3 emails from Grants.gov before the application is confirmed as validated and accepted by Grants.gov. At that point, the application is forwarded to the National Park Service for review. The first email only confirms that you have submitted your application and should look something like this. Thank you for submitting your grant application package via Grants.gov. Your application is currently being processed by the Grants.gov system. Once your submission has been processed, Grants.gov will send email messages to advise you of the progress of your application through the system. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, you should receive 2 emails. The first will confirm receipt of your application by the Grants.gov system, and the second will indicate that the application has either been successfully validated by the system prior to transmission to the grantor agency or has been rejected due to errors. The second email will state that your application was received by Grants.gov and is currently being validated. This may take up to 2 business days. It will also provide you a tracking number for your application. The third email will state that the application has been successfully validated by the system or has been rejected due to errors. If the application has been validated, the email will state, your application has been received and validated by Grants.gov and is being prepared for grantor agency retrieval. If your application is rejected due to errors, please contact Grants.gov immediately to resolve the issue. Once the application is submitted to Grants.gov, NPS will review the application and, if approved, create the grant agreement and email a copy to the THPO. At that point, the grant is active. No countersignature from the THPO is needed on the agreement. The THPO's acceptance of the grant conditions is confirmed by its drawing down funds from the federal grant account. Our review of your application includes our performing a formal risk assessment of the tribe to see if they have the ability to manage federal funds under this grant. This includes looking at government-wide databases to see if the tribe has had issues with other NPS or other government agency awards. It also requires that we confirm compliance with all single audit requirements. We will review your single audit to see if there are any findings that may affect the tribe's ability to manage the grant. If the tribe did not submit a single audit, we will ask you to complete a single audit certification form stating why it was exempt from submitting a single audit. Finally, we'll review the application to see if any work might have an adverse effect on the environment. If so, we must complete a detailed review of that work under the National Environmental Policy Act. A completed application package consists of the items listed here. We'll go through each of these forms in detail. Most of the application forms are completed online on www.grants.gov. However, 3 items must be completed offline and then attached to the application using the Attachments form on Grants.gov. These are the Annual Activities List, also known as a work plan, the Budget Narrative, or Budget Justification, and the Indirect Cost Rate Agreements, or de minimis indirect cost rate certification, if indirect costs are being charged to the grant. The first form you will complete is the SF-424 Application for Federal Assistance. It contains general information about the applicant, such as name, address, contact information, etc. The fields that cause us delay in processing your grant are, first, the DUNS field. Please enter your DUNS number, including the last 4 numbers. The zip code field. Please enter your zip code and the last 4 numbers following the normal 5. The county field. Please make sure to insert the name of your county in the address section of this form. And finally, the congressional district of the applicant and project area. Please don't guess the congressional districts for these areas. If you don't know your district, you can find it on the U.S. House of Representatives website simply by entering your zip code. If your state has an at-large congressional district, enter 00 as the district. If your state has a statewide congressional district, enter 99 as the district. The next form you'll complete is the SF-424A Non-Construction Budget Form. The application instructions included with the Grants.gov application contains a step-by-step guide for completing this form as required by the THPO program. We'll review the most important section of the form, which is Section B here. In this section, planned costs must be broken down by object class category, such as personnel, travel, or supplies. The total amount under each object class category must be further broken down to identify if the cost is supporting administration activities, operations activities, or contracting activities, each of which will be further defined in the following slides. In the first column, outlined in red, you'll list administration activity costs. In the second column, outlined in black, you'll list THPO operations activity costs. In the third column, outlined in blue, you'll list contracting activity costs. Let's look at administration costs first. Administration costs are allowable, reasonable, and allocable costs related to the overall management of activities directly related to finance, and that includes accounting, auditing, budgeting, and contracting, or general administrative salaries and wages, such as grant administration, personnel, property management, or equal opportunity, and other overhead functions, such as general legal services, general liability insurance, or depreciation on buildings and equipment, that are not directly attributable to specific program areas identified in the grant agreement. All administration costs must be reported and must be absolutely necessary for the project or program implementation. Here's are some typical administration costs: the preparation of audits, collection, storage, and retrieval of management information related to the central administrative control, administrative and support services or equipment needed for or related to the above, and some costs included in indirect cost rate agreements. The statute that created the HPF fund states that no more than 25% of grant funds may go toward administration and indirect costs. To ensure that your budget stays within these parameters, you should add the costs in column A, line I. This is the total direct charges for administration costs, and the total amount of line J, indirect costs. Then divide that amount by the total amount of the award. Now let's look at the THPO operations costs, which go in column 2. THPO operations costs are costs applied to the specific program area activities described in Chapter 6 of the Historic Preservation Fund Manual. These are activities that contribute to the accomplishments of the THPO's responsibilities. Eligible work for THPO operations are listed in Chapter 6 of the HPF Manual and are also included as Attachment A of the THPO HPF Grant Quick Guide, which can be viewed at the address you see on the slide. Sample operating costs include personnel costs for staff performing tasks related to THPO activities, projects, or goals, such as survey, National Register nominations, and educational projects. Equipment or supplies needed for eligible THPO projects, such as GPS equipment or vehicles. And travel expenses for THPO program meetings or conferences. Finally, let's look at contracting costs, which are listed in column 3. Contracting costs refer to contracted services or equipment. On the left side of the SF 424A is a list of the budget objective class categories. These include personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, other, and indirect costs. We'll clarify the differences between some of these in the following slides. How do you know if a person is considered personnel versus a contractor? Personnel are the direct employees of the tribe, including elders. Consultants or contractors are those providing professional services or services on the basis of a written agreement for a fee. Some tribes list stipends for elders under the other category, and that's allowable as well. Supplies and equipment are another set of costs that get confused. Supplies are items costing less than $5,000 with a life of less than 1 year, such as office supplies. Equipment includes tangible, non-construction items costing $5,000 or more per unit with a life of more than 1 year. All equipment must be approved by NPS prior to its purchase. The approval must be listed specifically in an email or letter. Approval of the overall grant application budget that includes equipment is not automatic approval of the purchase of equipment. Equipment purchases have additional annual and grant closeout reporting requirements. Indirect costs, or IDCs, are costs that cannot be easily tracked or accounted for under any one grant without a lot of effort, and may include things such as the cost of human resources personnel, accounting personnel, or utilities. Copies of all approved IDC agreements against which grant funds are being charged must be attached to the attachments form of the application. What costs can be charged to the grant? Costs must be allowable, meaning that they must be costs that are permitted under 2 CFR 200 and under the HPF Grant Manual. Funds for HPF activities not included in Chapter 6 of the HPF Manual, such as NAGPRA-related costs, are not allowable. Costs must be allocable, meaning it can be assigned to one or more activities or items on the basis of benefits received or other equitable or logical association. Costs must be reasonable, meaning the cost does not exceed that which would be incurred by a prudent person under the circumstances prevailing at the time the decision was made to incur the cost. And they must be defendable, meaning that if the cost was questioned, documentation would exist to support its need, allowability, allocability, and reasonableness. Appendix B of the THPO HPF Grants Quick Guide contains allowable costs specific to the HPF, and 2 CFR 200 contains the most recent detailed federal requirements for unallowable costs. Here is a list of common unallowable costs: the curation of artifacts after the grant end date, entertainment and alcohol, and most food, though the cost of providing very basic food or meals at meetings or conferences during the meeting is allowable. Honoraria, meaning money given to confer distinction on or to symbolize respect, esteem, or admiration for a recipient. Stipend for elder services are allowed. Lobbying, NAGPRA activities, travel expenses beyond the federal per diem rate, and equipment purchased without prior NPS approval. We'll wrap up our discussion of the SF 424A non-construction budget form by discussing program income. Program income is income earned through grant-funded activities during the grant period. Program income activities must be pre-approved by NPS before being collected and must be reported by the grantee in its financial reports. All program income earned is counted as part of the grant funds and is subject to all of the same federal regulations as the awarded grant funds. Applicants considering earning program income should carefully review the regulations regarding this in 2 CFR 200.307 and 2 CFR 200.80. Money earned from program income must be used before the federally funded awards are used. Now we'll look at the budget narrative or budget justification form, since it relates directly to the SF 424A non-construction budget form. The budget justification form provides a place to break down the object class category totals of the SF 424A and provide a justification for each cost, meaning listing why it's necessary, reasonable, and how it relates to the work under this grant. So, if you have $40,000 total budgeted for personnel on the SF 424A, you'll break down out each staff person's personnel costs and explain how their work contributes to the work of the grant. A suggested format for this is included under the Related Documents tab of the Grant Opportunity on Grants.gov. The budget justification worksheet must be attached to the attachment form and submitted with the application. The SF 424B non-construction assurances form contains a number of general assurances that the applicant must agree to in order to be eligible to receive federal funding. You can read through this and sign it on Grants.gov. The SF-424C construction budget form is used to break down the total construction costs listed on the construction line of the SF-424A non-construction budget form. If your tribe is not doing any construction work, this form can be left blank. The SF-424D Construction Assurances form contains a number of construction-related assurances that the applicant must agree to in order to be eligible to receive federal funding. This must be signed regardless of whether or not construction work is included in the application budget. We hold this in case the tribe decides, during the grant period, to modify the budget to allow for construction costs. Your application must include an annual anticipated activities list stating all of the activities that the THPO plans to accomplish with the grant funds. The THPO must report each program area it agreed to administer under its MOA partnership agreement with the NPS, as well as any other work paid for with this grant. At a minimum, this would include the number of properties expected to be added to the inventory, the number of Section 106 undertakings expected to be reviewed or consulted, any proposed preservation activities, and other activities paid for with the federal funds under the grant. A suggested format for this form is included in the Related Documents tab of the grant opportunity on Grants.gov. This form must also be attached to the attachments form and submitted with the application. Any activity in the anticipated activities list that NPS identifies as requiring review under the National Environmental Policy Act will be held for review. In these cases, NPS will ask the THPO to complete the NEPA worksheet that will help us determine if it requires any further action, such as an environmental assessment or environmental impact statement. You have to attach copies of all of the indirect cost rate agreements under which you are charging against under this grant agreement. If the tribe has never had an approved indirect cost rate agreement, federal regulations allow for it to request permission to charge a de minimis rate of 10% of the modified direct costs to the grant. To use this option, the tribe must submit a de minimis cost rate certification with the application. It cannot be instituted after the grant is written. This form is included under the Related Documents tab of the grant opportunity on Grants.gov and would be attached to the attachments form and submitted with the rest of the application. Lastly, any THPO receiving a grant of more than $100,000 must complete an SFLLL disclosure of lobbying activities. Audit requirements. Tribes expending $750,000 or more in total federal funds from all federal sources during the tribe's fiscal year must submit a single audit to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. It's the tribe's responsibility to notify NPS if it has any questioned costs or audit findings related to the HPF program, which is CFDA 15.904, in its audit. Additionally, if the tribe opts to not have the audit available to download off of the Federal Audit Clearinghouse, it must send a copy to NPS for review. Tribes that have not submitted a single audit for their last fiscal year will be required to complete an audit certification form indicating why an audit was not submitted. Once an application is approved, the grant funds are deposited directly into the tribe's ASAP Federal Payment System account. It's the tribe's responsibility to be registered in ASAP by the time it submits an application, or NPS will not be able to award the funds. As the tribe incurs expenses, it may request reimbursement for those expenses from its HPF grant account through ASAP. Reimbursement can be requested as often as necessary. However, if your tribe is identified as being medium or high risk in managing federal funds during the NPS's pre-agreement risk assessment, the tribe may be required to submit requests to the NPS for funds prior to being able to access the funds in ASAP. Advances are allowed, but may only be taken out in the amount that the tribe will expend within the following few days. Information regarding the grant requirements and reporting requirements are also available on the THPO program website that you see here. If you have problems with Grants.gov or ASAP, please contact their help desks directly. Grants.gov can be reached at 1-800-518-4726, and ASAP can be reached at 1-855-868-0151. Thank you.